to me, I feel like doing user feedback, even though it is a grind and, let's say every morning without fail, it will be at least 30 minutes of clearing out an inbox. I do think that gives me a superpower of knowing exactly what is wrong with the business and what people want to see out of it, and to steer it in a direction towards finding further product market fit.
Today, my guest is Jason Zigelbaum from Zigpoll. Jason, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And we have a repeat guest. This time he's on the other side as my co-host, Elston Barreto, the founder of Tiiny.
Hey, Pascal. Great to be back on your show. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much to both. So, Jason, you are the founder of Zigpoll. Tell me a little bit about the story of Zigpoll. How did it came about? When did you start focusing on it full time?
So Zigpoll, let's see, I started around 2019. The idea was to have an on-site survey that appears directly on a website, kind of like at the time they were doing Twitter surveys. This is back when it was called Twitter. And that was the initial idea, right? So you're a blog and you're like, hey, what content should I post next? And then, you see a survey on the site and then you fill it out. It's sort of evolved since then into more of an e-commerce focus. So now it's mostly for post-purchase surveys or fulfillment surveys or delivered surveys. And it took a little while to get there. But that was the starting point. And then, it sort of grew, and it's kind of meta, right? But, my main thing is listening to customer feedback and then sort of adjusting your product accordingly. So we would use the product to gather feedback about the product, and then that sort of steered us in this direction to where we are now. And it feels like we found product market fit, in this sort of e-commerce niche of on-site email, SMS surveys. And it's now we sort of reached that next phase where it's where do we go from here now that we found this sort of fit, and how do we scale and all that sort of stuff.
And so you started as a side project, or you started full time?
So previously I started off at an e-commerce agency. I left and started building a Shopify app called Metafields Manager, which is basically sort of a back of house tool that other agencies would use to build websites, and that was the starting point. And then we had some success with that, and I used sort of my spare time from that to start Zigpoll concurrently.
At what point did you say goodbye to Metafields and focused solely on Zigpoll?
Yeah, so that decision was kind of made for me. So Shopify they basically built the product and added it internally to their dashboard. So now they offer Metafields as an internal product. So that kind of ate away a lot of the momentum and the steam from Metafields Manager. So I was like, all right, I want to keep this lifestyle going of solo app developer and being on my own schedule and all that sort of stuff. We better have another product. I better have something else going on. So that sort of motivated me to put a lot of effort into Zigpoll and to sort of make sure that was a success, because I had to sort of keep this lifestyle going. Once you give up the boss and sort of the grind and all that sort of stuff, and you work for yourself, it's pretty hard to go back.
Yeah, I agree. And how big was Zigpoll when that Metafields, I would say, misadventure arrived?
Yeah, it was small. I'd say 2018. I think probably they announced it 2020 was when they absorbed Metafields. So it must have been 500 MRR or something like that, something minuscule. But it's a gradual decline, right? It's not like everyone just leaves at once. So I had some runway there, and I had some other projects as well that didn't make the cut, right? So I had some other businesses in the music industry that I was doing at the same time. So this is just sort of the one that found a way to both be fun to build and also be profitable, because that becomes important.
Yeah. And so today the MRR is at
I think we're around 67, 68, something like that. Okay, yeah.
And like Elston, you're also in the triple-digit growth year-over-year category, right?
Yeah, I think it was 100% last year, just around there.
So that's amazing. But obviously the company is just you right now?
It is, yeah. It's always been just me.
And most of revenue comes from the marketplace, or all of it?
Not all of it, but most of it. Like I'd say around 90% comes from the Shopify App Store.
And so people can use you without using Shopify, so on other platforms?
Yeah, exactly. And that was the original idea, right? Was that anyone with a website could use this product. It just so happened that, we sort of found, it's easy to grow on an app store, right? Because the marketplace is already there. So that sort of informed the growth moving forward. But yes, you can use it on everything.
And the 10%, how do they find you? Is it through your content on LinkedIn, or is it through other means?
I think that's been a good, that's been a great channel, right? LinkedIn. There's also, ads on, Facebook and Meta and stuff like that. So a mix of that.
And when people go through the ads on Facebook, do they get to the marketplace, or do they go to the website and then they can go through to the marketplace?
That's a good question. It's both. The ones that go to the marketplace convert better because, we're sort of highly optimized for that channel. And that's sort of been an effort this year, is to sort of improve the homepage, the landing pages, more of the sort of standard SaaS playbook stuff on my side.
Today, for the indie board session, you came to me because you had a few challenges that you wanted to. I mean, we all have challenges, but you had a few specific challenges that you wanted to discuss and to get feedback on. One was around team growth. I mean, you reach a quite high MRR to be by yourself. So and especially you're quite technical, and so giving away your baby on the technical side is a fairly high. I would
It's
say
uncomfortable. It's sensitive.
It's uncomfortable, exactly.
Yeah.
And then obviously you have other questions about platform risk, as a lot of your revenue comes from Shopify, and you've had experience like platform risk with Shopify before with your previous project. And the third one that we'll broach probably towards the end is around AI, both in terms of how do you use it, how do you and the competition that it can unleash as well. So let's start on the team growth side. So you're by yourself, you're at fairly high size, revenue wise. Elston, I remember when you mentioned that you had a team of now 3 or 4 on a product and engineering.
Yeah, well, we have a team of basically 4, excluding me now. Yeah.
And so I'm curious, what was the trigger for you to start building the team? And then maybe can you explain to Jason how you went about to build step by step the team and give up the control that you had at the beginning?
Yeah. So yeah, first off, congrats on your success. It's amazing how far you've managed to get as a solo founder. But yeah, it was pretty early on. I think it was around probably 20K MRR that ended up looking into getting a team. And I think the biggest trigger point, and I don't know if you feel that, is that you are always on the hook for everything, especially if you are the only person there. And so that was everything from a support issue that came through to developing the product to marketing it. And I think for me, at some point, you just felt like you're in this like infinite like hamster wheel where you're just constantly like doing the same things over and over again and just trying to keep the lights on as opposed to grow the business. And my biggest kind of strategy and thinking was I need to stop working in the business. I need to work on the business. And for that point, I need to basically build a foundation that would run it and help, do the bigger things. So then I could now focus on what's next, right? And figure out how do we really take the company to the next level. And so that was the main kind of thought process behind paving in those kind of footsteps.
So that sounds very much like me, right? That sounds exactly like, like Jay, you're on the hook for everything, anything goes wrong, it's on you. And also just like just the grind, right? Like, if the inbox every day is full, right? Every day there's a full inbox of queries and stuff like that. And I would like to get out of it. I guess for me, what I'm finding challenging is like where to start, like how do you get that first sort of step in? How do you take the leap, I guess, between it's both a trust thing, right? You have to find someone that you can trust enough to basically share your secrets with, right? And then how do you find that person? What kind of compensation package do you consider appropriate for that person, right? Like, are they also now a co-founder? Like, how in your mind did that work? Because that's the part that I'm struggling with, right? It's like where to begin even looking, right? Um,
Yeah.
that's it. Yeah. What do you think?
No,
How'd
no.
you do it? What's
Good
your secret?
questions. I mean, there's different ways of doing it. I mean, I know people that have probably tried to find, for example, one super high quality person, effectively like, yeah, maybe a pseudo co-founder later in the game, and then divided work that way. But I've been much more around building kind of more of a bigger team, but at an affordable kind of cost because I'm bootstrapped and you are, I'm guessing as well. And it's usually using a mix of onshore and offshore kind of people. And so the easiest things I think to outsource or just take off your plate are just the repetitive functions. So like that's the first things. I think it's very difficult, and you'll fail quite quickly if you try to find someone to do something that you don't know how to do, um, because they may have the context, for example, in I don't know, in marketing, for example, but you have the context of your product, and so it's very difficult to do that. So it's easier to find someone to, for example, if you're getting a lot of support stuff and you're routinely seeing that you're just answering the same questions again and again. There's ways to automate it with AI, but there's also a way to hire someone, a VA or something, just to manage kind of the lightweight stuff. And so we have two support people now who work effectively around the clock, and it does take time to train them up. But there are also like safe guardrails in that sense. So a lot of the repetitive tasks, communicating with people, especially when someone wants to speak specifically to a human, they'll pick up. But then anything which requires, specific stuff in terms of billing and account management and stuff, they'll just escalate towards me. And eventually, I want to take that off my plate. So it's about slowly kind of just stepping the mark up. So getting them to do like repetitive tasks and moving them on. So that's from like more just operations. From an engineering perspective, I basically started off by getting kind of a sidekick, right? So I would effectively still be running the show engineering wise, but then you had kind of somebody who was junior or mid who you would work with, to slowly give us small like parts of tasks. And trust is earned over time. I think that's the most important thing. Like you need a long relationship with somebody to do that. And so again, I wouldn't just easily hand over the keys with somebody. It would be about like really giving them small tasks and then seeing how they perform, editing the work, and going down that route. And then and then seeing how that goes, and building the team around that, if that makes sense.
And just also on that note, the person that you did work with alongside yourself, is he the one who's now your lead, or
No, so well, I actually eventually the way I did it, because I hired kind of an offshore engineer, and they were kind of junior and mid, and then I eventually hired a lead actually, to completely take things off and kind of, from a perspective, because I think that is important, because it will take a long time for somebody to really be of that caliber. You need to probably replace yourself, but a lead is more expensive. But at the same time, they come in with just that, process, architecture understanding, technical understanding, and then can manage that person. And then effectively, you communicate with the lead, and the lead can effectively communicate with the other person. So it really depends, how big and how you want to build a team for transparency. We have, effectively three engineers on the team. One is a lead, and two are like more mid junior engineers. And I think that's enough really to do a lot of things. And then it's just slowly about knowledge sharing towards those kind of, roles. But one thing that and it's the whole like founder mode versus, manager mode kind of debate. One thing that I've always kept for a while, you could call it micromanaging, but it's worked really well, is just I effectively know who to assign tasks to, and I manage that kind of the process to assign what needs to get done. And so I will basically know that this person's really good for this person's really good for that, and from that structure, a full pipeline of features and a product roadmap. And so I'm always on the top of what is going on, but I'm not doing the actual implementation, which is the most time-consuming part. I've turned into more of an editor, and overseeing, looking at pull requests and that kind of stuff. Because I realize as well myself, and I still, dive deeply into something like a ticket, and you can just be sucked in so deeply into that everything else, basically gets neglected. But when you are in that edit mode and you can just give feedback, tell people this is not right, we want it this way, or you basically set an overarching architecture. So with a junior dev, for example, you will break down exactly how you think it should be done. And then the actual implementation is pretty much like there for someone just to go in and execute on. But it's going to be done in a way that you expected it, because you set the architecture, the overview, maybe the data structure, whatever. But it's meeting those expectations and making sure that they're working in line with you, as opposed to like just throwing it over the fence and hoping that they will come back with a good enough solution. Because I think that's when it can be very difficult and frustrating, because you don't get what you need, right? Whereas if you are overseeing stuff very closely, and hand in hand working with them, but they're actually doing most of the time consuming work. That's where it's worked really well for me.
I would like to add a few things to that. I think that the support item is actually something very, especially at your scale, Jason. I think that it will already remove a lot of burden and the treadmill dimension of it.
So I've mentioned this. Like I've spoken about this to a lot of people about a lot, and part of it is because I do run a certain like a feedback product, right? But I am kind of maniacal about. To me, I feel like doing user feedback, even though it is a grind, and let's say every morning without fail, it will be at least 30 minutes of clearing out an inbox. I do think that gives me a superpower of knowing exactly what is wrong with the business and what people want to see out of it, and to steer it in a direction towards finding further product market fit.
You can do it both in two ways. There is reading the content and having to respond. And you can focus on the reading and less on the responding. And I think that's a completely different mindset.
And that's exactly what I do. So like for complete transparency, I'm not oblivious to what the support comes through. I still get notification, I still read like the emails coming through, but I don't actually respond to them. And so I have an overview, and then, but I also think it's worth, like, it takes time, but whoever's in support, you have to train them to pick up on signals and give feedback and raise patterns with your team, with the product team, and eventually they'll filter through a lot of things. But I still respond to like the occasional message on instant message, or the email here and there. But I'm not doing 90% of it, right? But I'm still aware of like what's coming through and that kind of thing. And I think it's not about, again, like completely throwing it over the fence. I think it's about basically having visibility on doing a little bit of it, but not most of it. And that's where the sweet spot is.
Yeah.
So it sounds like I need to stop thinking of this as like an all or nothing sort of approach, and more of like a gradual sort of, try it, see how it goes. If you like it, keep it. If you don't like it, you can always go back, sort of thing. And that would make it less intimidating.
And the other thing that you mentioned earlier, which I thought was interesting, was around the late co-founder or not, kind of that kind of question. I think that it's I think it's too much of a loaded question. my point is this: it feels a little bit like the show The Bachelorette. They're supposed to get married at the end, so it puts a lot of pressure on the relationship, and that's why it breaks most of the time. That's one of the reasons why it breaks. But my point is that you can hire somebody either offshore or onshore. You're lucky enough, Jason, with your business size that you can afford to hire somebody in the US, for example. Whereas when you're doing 20K in MRR, even in the UK, you can find somebody in the UK, but there's not a lot of when you added all the taxes and all that stuff, there's not much much more meat left in the bone on the bone. And so I would say that that's more of a personal decision. It depends on your lifestyle, I would say how you want to scale the team. I think that the most important is in terms of compensation, is to compensate based on three things. One is geography. You want that person to be well where they are. Two, obviously, skill set. And three, if you want, you can always incentivize them over time to get a percentage of revenue, profit, whatever, so that they feel that they have skin in the game, and that their success or they are rewarded by it. And so I think that's very, very important. You can do that over time. You can do that after 3 months, 6 months, whatever. But I think that it helps. And maybe you decide that they're not your co-founder for Zigpoll, but if you branch from Zigpoll to Zig whatever, then on the second business they're kind of co-founder-ish. So there are multiple ways to do it, because you don't know whether Zigpoll is the end-all be-all of your current business anyway.
Yeah, so this is all a bit. This is very insightful for me, right? Because you read the stuff on LinkedIn or whatever, and it's like hire, grow your team, and then you're like, well, what does hire mean? Part time, full time. How do you find these? Like, I know what hiring means at an e-commerce agency in New York, but I don't know what it means for a project run by one person that's a SaaS business. That's relying on the Shopify app store, right? Like, how do you hire for that? Do you go through an agency? Do you find someone yourself through LinkedIn? Do you find someone, yourself through, the gym at your local place? There are a lot of different ways to do it. And it sounds like it's a bit more of an art than a science than perhaps I was originally sort of thinking about going about it.
Yeah, Elston, you found the people. If I remember from the podcast, you mentioned you found them on. You knew some of the folks, right?
Yeah, so actually one of the engineers I hired, we worked together on a previous, actually two of them. The first person I ever worked with was a part-time engineer, and I worked with him at a previous company, and he was just working, effectively moonlighting for us, and very, very helpful early on. And then one of the people in our current team is a engineer I was working on in a previous project with a friend of mine, and so he's based in kind of Nigeria, and I already had a working relationship with him, knew what he was like, and it was really easy to kind of work with. So it's one of those one of the best hacks is just find people you've worked with before or already, right, rather than somebody new.
And can I ask, did you pay them hourly, or how did that go
with the fractional person?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's basically but it's more like we have, and this was at our scale, we were quite small, right? So we have budget for X amount of hours a week. This is what we can agree on. Is that okay for you? And let's just figure out what can be done in that. So there's a budgeted kind of hourly kind of rate, and that was working well for the early days. And now it's kind of a fixed monthly contract for full-time work.
Mm-hmm. I got one more question for you. When you switch to working with other folks, right? There's a hit financially to yourself, right? Because now all of a sudden the money that you had that went directly into your pocket now goes to someone else. How did that feel? and when did that feel? Were there times where it felt wrong? Were there times where it felt right? Because I would hate to waste money doing something that I could do myself, right? Like that's the mindset. And you're gonna say, change your mindset. It's about growing. Like I get that. But I'm just curious how it felt, right? Because like, how do you take that leap?
Yeah, and I think for me, I was never in, and it comes down to the founder. Like when I built the business, I was never in it to build it just for 10K MRR, 20K MRR. I was always in it to build it on a longer trajectory, and I've personally not like needed to take a lot of money out of the company. I've taken as much as I need. Also, like based on UK tax reasons, I try to maintain within tax thresholds, right? So we have a lot of capitalists in the company that I don't personally take out because of the tax implications. So also spending the money within the company reduces the tax bill. And so for me, it didn't hit too much, but from it's a mindset thing as well. Like for me, it was always like I want to continue to grow the business. And the only way really to grow, there's only so far you can go as a solo person. For me, the only way to grow was to effectively hire a team and get them to do bigger and work on more interesting things and effectively grow the product. And our product is quite complex from the feature perspective. So there's a lot of different things we do, and also we have a massive user base, and so it need in more than one person. It's just inherently, or some products can be done with maybe 2 or 3 people. Um, and so there's a lot of variables in place, but I always look at it from an investment. It's never this person is costing me something. It's more like every person I bring, they need to be growing the product, growing the team, and effectively we need to be moving forward with them. Because if it's not that thing, then it's not working out. But also it's some kind of, I'd say, personal insurance or weight of yourself that you pay for, right? That and there's been plenty of times when the infrastructure has gone down or there's been a big production issue and the team has just resolved it. And I remember those times when I was like on the hook for that versus being able to just wake up in the morning and know that it's already been resolved, right? So you that's what you effectively get, right, in return. And so it's not all monetary gains all the time, but effectively it's an investment, right? You're in the VC world, it's like the capital just goes on people at the end of the day, right? And so when you get cash, they want you to hire so that you grow the company. And effectively the hope is that with more people you can effectively grow. And that's changing with AI, of course, and people being more efficient. But money investment is spent on people, and because people are the resource that's going to grow your business a lot of times.
Fair. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's scary. I feel like I think that's maybe the key, right? That AI makes it more efficient, but it doesn't make it go away, right? Like maybe instead of hiring 4 people, I can get away with hiring 2, which would be great for me.
Yeah, and you're at a really good
Yeah.
opportune time because when I started, we didn't really have some of the LLM things, especially with support now. There's some very, very sophisticated products that will literally just do
I have
all the
noticed the
basic
support
level of
stuff is
support.
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like I remember implementing, a bot for our chat. We use Crisp, like Intercom. And before we would just get a tons of kind of just very low level questions that I needed to respond to. And if you didn't respond to it, it looked like, you just had bad support. And now the bot legit just cut that down to like 50% and answered it really, really well because it's trained on a knowledge base. It even like does some lightweight sales for us when people ask, why should we use you? And then all the rest of the stuff is picked up by like 1 or 2 support people. And then all the complex stuff, which it trickles down to just a few handful of things, gets kind of raised to me. And so there's this kind of hierarchy of people now that kind of get in the way.
At the end of the day, again, especially at your stage, you need to run experiments if you want to go to the next level. And you already done a lot with, I would say, very little. I mean, obviously, the Shopify ecosystem means that you have less of a, you have to spend less time on SEO or on other items that, for example, Tiiny or some of our apps ourselves do have to take care of. So in a way, your problem set is a bit more constrained. But I think that, especially if you think about branching out or expanding, which is something that we'll talk about later, um, having somebody else to share some of the burden will be helpful. And as Elston said, you can start small. You can start hourly. I mean, you can start in a non-committed way, which helps. Going back to my dating analogy earlier, initially it's a
Right.
low
Start with coffee
expectation.
and then dinner. We'll get there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You meet them at the park. um, Especially in New York, days can be very expensive.
Yeah.
But no, but you can do it lightweight, and then you grow from there.
A question I usually and I wonder if you have like an answer for this is there anything that you've been itching, to build that you just haven't found the time to do, right? And it's effectively like a new part of the product or something different, a siloed. Like for us, it's kind of extensions and integrations, right? And so something early on I did is I was like, I really want to build maybe the Zapier integration for us, but I just haven't got the time. So you just hire someone on a project basis to build that integration. And you can learn a lot about how they work. It's also external to your code base, so you don't basically give them complete access to it. And they've helped you build something which you wouldn't have built because it's like on a parallel work stream, right? And they're independent. And then, you can slowly onboard them into the main project after that. So that's a really good lightweight way to start off, is just find a project that you've really been itching to work on that you haven't had the opportunity to do, and you just find someone to work on that.
That's funny because I had the exact same thought, right? Like, I was like, okay, I want to get more done. I need to figure this out. There are so many things that I want to do on the roadmap that it just keeps going. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger, right? Not smaller. But what I did over the summer was I did exactly what you're saying. It was a Zapier integration. It was literally, we did an API and then we did Zapier and then we did Make. But the difference, instead of hiring someone, that was my sort of entry into like using Claude Code and ChatGPT and stuff. And so I used that as sort of the one-off, like project. And instead of handing it to a person, I handed it to Claude in this case. It wasn't a perfect shot, and it definitely took a lot of my time. But that's one to say that strategy is effective, very smart, very good. Well, pat myself on the back, right? Very smart. But two, I guess and maybe it's probably me, right? Like I'm, as you can probably tell after chatting, like, I had this sort of all or nothing mindset. Like, this code's my baby. I don't want to hand it off to a person. Handing it off to a machine, however, it's less scary. It's less like intimidating. I'm less worried what the machine's going to think. Like, the machine doesn't care. And so I found that less intimidating, and I tried that, and I think it was effective, but perhaps less effective than in the long term than having like, an offshore person that I could go to, sort of like future projects and stuff like that. Although the verdict's still out, right? We'll see what happens in a year, how good these things get. But just curious. I just feel like it's like a curious sign of the times, right? Where like now, where you would have reached for like someone offshore, now I'm looking like, okay, let's try and do a side project with Claude. Yeah.
And I'm just curious, what are the big reservations that you've had in terms of like keeping your baby to yourself versus getting some help? Is that just like IP or?
So I think it's a couple of things. No, it's not IP. I mean, maybe I'm tripping, but I don't think that there's such a thing really as IP in software and SaaS. Like, I feel like everything is copyable. And from a legal perspective, I don't think it's enforceable. But no, it's just, one, I feel like I got burned. I managed a lot of people kind of early in my career, and it wasn't my favorite thing to do. And I don't really look forward to doing it again, right? Like this lifestyle of I wake up, I do whatever I want. Usually that ends up in doing exactly what I'm supposed to do. But like, there's a chance I could deviate from that path and do something else, and it would be fine. But as soon as you have other people in the mix, like, you have stand-ups, you have to talk to them at a certain time, we have to schedule meetings, that sort of like freedom kind of goes away. Now, part of that is probably in my head. And, you end up doing the same thing, but it's different when you don't have to do it versus when you have to do it, at least in my opinion. So that's one part of it. And that's like quality of life stuff. And then the other is, I think, just it's slower to get started. So like, and this probably goes back to the investment mindset, right? Like, if I'm thinking of it just like, Jay, I want to get this feature out the door, let's hire someone, it'll go faster. Well, hold up. the answer is no. It probably won't go faster at first. Maybe the second or third feature will go faster, but certainly not this one. So just sort of that investment mindset, has been a bit of a challenge for me. It's like, all right, screw it, I'll just do it myself. Is sort of where I always land, at least in the past.
Yeah, and I still struggle with that to this day with the team, and also people like joining the team, leaving the team. But I will say one thing: there's nothing more satisfying as a founder when you have someone who's like performing at max velocity within the team, who's experienced, and you just say, "This is the problem. Can you go and fix it?" And it comes back and is fixed, and that's like as much communication as you give, and you come back and you're very satisfied with the response. But that's some of the most, I guess, magical moments when you have a team that's functioning. It takes time. You're literally taking one step back to go two steps forward. But when it gets there, it's very, very cool.
Yeah, I would like that. It sounds also somewhat relaxing, right? You can do it from the beach. You just text on Slack, hey, you solve this? Yeah.
Exactly. And
that's
nice. That can happen.
Yeah.
But it's a mind. You have to really understand that for the next few months, like this is what it's going to be like, and it's really difficult battle internally. Like I could literally do this in like an hour versus like let me train someone. But then if you are in this, if you're committed to it, you realize that what's the point of me doing it versus like why do I have this team if they're not working on this? And once you invest in, as with most things in life, right, you invest in things and you make the right decisions, eventually it'll pays rewards back. It's also really cool when you see like decisions being made, and people talking to each other and things just being fixed without your intervention, right? So you have someone who's a designer or a product manager and the developer, and they're all working in sync, and this has just been fixed and sorted out without your kind of involvement to it, or right kind of place. And it definitely takes time, but those things are when you have a well-oiled kind of machine running.
Let's go to the next topic, if you don't mind. Or do you have other questions or
No, I mean, I guess last question I will ask, just because this like might be actually useful. Like I'm probably gonna take all this stuff and take notes and do it. How long do you feel like it took between when you sort of like started committing to this shift of like just yourself to other people to when it actually started taking effect and seeing a positive ROI, right? Like when did you start to see like dividends from this choice?
Yeah, and so that can depend on multiple variables, like who you're hiring, seniority, and how talented they are. But I wouldn't say it's less than if it's after a month, that's great. But I say it could take 1 to 2 months to a point. Especially any new engineer, depends how big your code base is. They really need to get comfortable with and effectively like load it into their memory. And that can take like a month at least, right? But I'd say you're probably looking at a quarter, maybe 2 to 3 months, where you can get maybe on like the junior mid level, it could take 2-3 months. At the senior level, it could take a month, someone to get in. But it's definitely a few weeks kind of in the game to really do that. And that can be frustrating because what you can be done in a few weeks versus you're hiring to do. That's from a technical perspective. And I'd say from like an operation perspective, probably the same thing. Like you just got to repeat the same things over and over again. But it really forces you also to like get into the right process of stuff. Like stuff you haven't documented is now documented because someone needs to know how to do it. And so like we have like more like solid support processes and understanding of things before you create tools that you didn't need before because you knew how to do everything, but now there's an external tool and then you use the same tool. So it's a bit of an iterative process, but it's I think within 4 to 6 months you should have something like set up there, depending on like how many people you're hiring, etc. But I'd be a bit patient in that.
Right, because it compounds over time. Cool. Well, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Cool. No worries.
Good advice. Yeah.
We can talk about the platform risk. We can talk about the AI integration and competition. What do you think would be the most useful, Jason?
I mean, platform risk, I could just talk about for days because it's more just me venting about platform risk and the fear of it. I don't know. I mean, I suppose the AI conversation is probably a bit more useful to everyone. I mean, I guess I'll say, with platform risk, right? Like, it's useful in the beginning, like you said, because it constrains, your problem set, right? So where instead of focusing on the world, you can focus on this particular subset of users, and you have their attention because instead of competing with the world, you're competing with, X amount of apps on the App Store. That it's a double-edged sword. It's constrained at the beginning, useful if you're a solo developer, and then it becomes a little bit trickier as you grow, because one, you have sort of there's a limit to your growth because you're in a subset of customers, and then also you're sort of at the whims of this larger sort. I mean, you're always at the whims of somebody. It seems market forces, whatever. But it's a subset of market forces that you're also sort of have to follow and stick with. So I guess that's it. I mean, I guess like as you grow, you have to sort of crack it, hire more people, figure out how to sort of expand beyond the initial sort of like constraints, or or have a lifestyle business, totally different. Like say like, all right, this is the size I'm willing to grow to and stuff like that. Depends on the product. But for me, at least, just to be clear for whoever's listening, I do want to sort of like, it's a survey tool, right? Like it has a wide variety of use cases. It's a very large market. Everyone has some sort of need for a survey, right? It's a structured way to speak with your customers. So I think it does make sense to sort of grow out of there. And so that's kind of the direction I want to go. But I think this, that's it. That's the rant. Unless,
yeah, I mean, I think in your case, I think that there are a few things. First of all, it's possible that your competition, like if Shopify, for example, launched a survey tool, it would probably cut people from the lower paid plan, but it would probably not be something that the Shopify Plus or some of the larger stores would use. So in your case, that's how I would think about it, because that's how Shopify has typically acted in the past. And I see that, for example, I had a friend of mine who launched a forms product for Notion, and then Notion launched a forms product for Notion. And I mean, that's what happened. I mean, basically, his $9 a month or $10 a month plan went away for the most part, but everybody above that is still paying because they need advanced features that Notion is not providing. So it was a cut in his revenue, but it was okay. Like, it was manageable.
Right.
So that's like one thing.
A death blow.
And as you grow the team a little bit, then you can kind of try to go either serve better the up market. And I think that in your case, I mean, you should actually listen to a podcast we did with Elston, because I think that in your case, the ability to go deeper, much deeper with the larger customers, and sell them really kind of 5 to 6 figure deals is a possibility because of the importance of it. And that's going to be a game changer for your company, because at the end of the day, they're not buying you. The fact that you're integrated in Shopify is a plus, but it's not necessarily the discovery mechanism. So I think that's also something that, as you grow the team, have more time to spend to think about that, will be an opportunity for you.
Now, let me ask you a question as sort of more of like the acquisition sort of side of things. What do you think a strategy? I mean, I guess it depends. I mean, it depends on the person, obviously. But now there's a strategy where you could build a company to the size and then sell it, right, to someone like Nuso Labs or something like that. Now, is that how does that strategy fit? Like in your mind, right? Like, is it more of a hassle to commit the year to building up your team and doing all this stuff, or do you say, let's let it go, quit while we're ahead and start something else?
I think that I would say a few things. Considering the growth and the size of your business and probably your price expectations derived from it, you actually have if I were you, and I mean, I know we initially met because we approached you to potentially acquire Zigpoll. So, but I would say that considering all the parameters of your business, I think that you're better off going all the way, because the people, we can't probably pay the price that you want, but the people that can are bigger, and they would like you to be a more established business that is not kind of a solo shop. So I think that in a way you've been too successful for people like me, and you're better off going to tap upstream to bigger buyers that actually value you as a team, like as a company, and not as a bootstrap founder. Like I wish we had met when you were doing 20K MRR and you had sold to us, and we would have reaped the benefit of it. But the reality is that you didn't need that, and that's fine. Um, and so now you need to move to the next level, and the next level is about building the team, in my mind, and also de-risking it, because it's not a bunch of stores paying between $19 and $159 a month or whatever is your pricing, but it's a real company with a lot of small or a lot of mid and some very large customers that are growing and growing and rely on you, because it has an effect on their return on ad spend or whatever, and that's very valuable. That then you become a valuable asset for a private equity group or a SaaS group, or even a Shopify roll-up. I mean, there are still a bunch of them, and in a way, they'll live with that risk, right? They live and die with that risk. They know
Right.
that
Yeah, that's their plan.
that's their plan, right? So if Shopify removes the marketplace, they die, and it's like. There are some risks you need to take, because there is no way to de-risk you
Hmm.
on everything.
Yeah, for
Okay.
sure. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, helpful advice. Thank you.
I mean, the last maybe we can go for 10 minutes on the AI stuff. I think that it would be interesting both to understand how you're using AI. I remember you were telling me that you were using Claude code for development. Um, and also what you're afraid of, like how do you view that, and then obviously both Elston and I can.
So yeah, I mean, so that's the question, right? Like, how are people using these tools? Because there's how they tell you people are using these tools, and there's a lot of hype around it, and people are telling you that they're building these SaaS products in 10 seconds and all that sort of stuff. But is that reality? Is that really, does it work? I don't know. Let's find out. So for me, I tried, so similar to what Elston was talking about earlier, right? You want to start with sort of like a side little standalone encapsulated, feature or project, whatever you want to call it, to get started. And that's what I did. I started with Claude Code for some sort of like backend SEO stuff. So basically like building like content generators and stuff like that. And it was useful. And you have sort of this initial dopamine hit where you're like, holy cow, like my job is over. You know what I mean? Like I don't have to touch a line of code again. The machine's going to do it. I just agents. But then, you work on it, and then you're like, okay, this is like it looks right. And it looks like way smarter than anything I could come up with, but like, is it really? And then you notice, and like, there's some weird stuff going on with it. And then you try to get to correct it. And it just sort of starts to become this weird mess of just like tangled webs of like the smartest guy coming up with sort of like the dumbest stuff you've ever seen. And that's the state where it got to, and then I stopped using it. So that's the review of Claude Code. For me, is that it kind of makes sense, right? When you think about how these things work, right? They're designed to give you a answer that looks correct, not necessarily is correct, but looks correct. And I feel like that's just like this whole new level of like insidious bug that you've never seen before, right? Because the smartest guy never wrote the dumbest code. That doesn't make any sense. But now it can, and it does. So mixed review for like it did build something for me and it was useful, and it found a couple bugs that I had, and that was totally on me. But to get past sort of like a quick small feature, I feel at this point in time is not plausible or possible. So that's what view of Claude. And then, but where I have found a lot of success and felt sort of like empowered is using these tools, GPT, Claude, doesn't really matter, for like much smaller sort of like bite-sized, whether it's like refactoring or maybe it's like coming up with something that like a nice to have feature, right? Like something like autofocus or maybe like bot detection on like the client, something that would have taken me, a couple hours of like Stack Overflow searching and like been a little bit looked like chicken scratch sort of thing with like a bunch of different rules, like that it excels, like those sorts of like quality of life improvements are no longer like out of reach or no longer like for like a lazy Sunday. They become like a right now sort of thing. And that's why I've been using it. So that's me. But I guess my fear, right, is like, one, I feel I have to be using these tools, and I'm glad that I have, because they have been effective, in those two sort of more limited use cases. But also it's like, is someone else going to crack this before I do? And if they do, the machine's going to work way faster than I can. And then these, is a competitor going to churn out way more features? Because that's kind of always been, my advantage, right? Is like, I work fast, there's no red tape, just, Jason at the computer, type in the feature. If someone asks for it, I can have it done the same day. So that's been an advantage of mine. So like if someone else were to crack it using AI, that would be a problem for me, right? So I need to make sure that I'm at least on top of it. So that, I don't know. And then I feel like everyone has a different sort of like perspective on it based on LinkedIn. So I don't know if you guys have like a different take.
Well, yeah, I think to start off, like AI is extremely hyped, and it's a lot more hyped than the reality is out there. Like the stuff on Twitter, I built this entire SaaS, and it's pretty impressive. But you're starting to see it's so early in the cycle, but you're starting to see people then posting things about, I released app to production, and then it kind of exposed my database. My database got hacked, and this happened, that happened, and it's basically all the kind of the fallacies you see in that. So I don't think it's anywhere near like or a replacement of like an engineer. I think you're right in the sense that it's very, very good for very small bite-sized things. For example, I needed to add a very boring tasks that you didn't want to do, but you need to do, right? So I needed to add a cookie banner on kind of one of my pages, and it just kind of did that. But even with that, it did it about 70% of the way, and then I had to do the last 20%. And so I think that's like the most popular way of using it. People use it for that kind of thing. I don't think it's very good for huge, deep problems like you want to say, like build this entire feature set with. I think one thing I have noticed is that when it goes, as soon as it goes down the wrong route and you see it hasn't delivered what you expect, you have to cut your losses then and just kind of restart. You will never get out of that mess because it just keeps going worse and worse and worse. And so like I'm very cautious about what it kind of outputs and looking very closely. And as long as it's kind of delivering what I expect, you keep going. But you got to cut your losses at some point. If it does that, it's never going to recover. But then what I've also seen is the other side of things where people use it in a very, very deep tech basis. So these are engineers that will basically are in the whole workflows around AI. And so, rather than just like prompting stuff, they will create like a 1-page spec sheet of exactly what needs to be done. And that's where it's actually the most powerful, like breaking down every single thing. There's no ambiguity, and then giving that to like Claude Code, and it just executes on it. And then there's the next level of that where someone will literally create a ticket on Linear or something like that, and then connect via MCP, and as soon as it's like in a certain column, Claude Code will kick off on a serverless level and then raise a PR against it. And so there's these very deep tech workflows which are coming through. But the thing is with that, like you have to then invest. It's like learning a programming language in some sense, right? You have to invest in learning how to build these kind of big problem statements, and they need to be built in the right way. There's the prompt engineering side of things. Like there is an art to prompt engineering. So it's really about like how deep do you want to get into that rabbit hole, right? So there's different ways of doing it. But yeah, in general, I think it's nothing to. I think it saves a lot of time, and that's where the baseline value is, right? Something would have taken me, half a day to be done. I can now do it in like an hour, but it's never gonna take it to zero. It is always going to require some involvement, some tweaking, oversight, and that. But I see that as value in itself, right? So it may have taken me, 3 days to do 3 tickets, but I could do like three in one day now, and then quickly kind of ship that out. And so it is progress in that, but it's, for me right now, I see it as it's a sidekick. It's not like a replacement, but it's a really good way to like start off as well. And I think the future may be, rather than as we had done now, because historically we've written the code first and then we've added like AI to help improve it. It will be something like you start off by, you start off prompting something and the AI will generate the baseline for it. And then you kind of edit it and then, run some more prompts in it, etc. But it's code generation first to kind of save you all the boilerplate stuff and the scaffolding or whatever that would, take you like, an hour or whatever to set up. And then you spend the rest of the time just tweaking and advancing things. But you still need the oversight. You need the intuition. You need to know what's good and what's bad, right? Because it won't tell you that. And that's where I'm kind of at, if that makes sense.
I feel like that's the hard part, though, right? Knowing what's good and what's bad, like that. I mean, that's always, that's the senior developer,
as a
right? It's the
senior
guy
engineer,
who knows the difference, Yeah. Well, I mean, it's tricky. It's curious. Like, do you invest the time? And I think I lean towards investing the time in people and sort of what we chatted the first half of this the podcast about. Like, or you could also invest the time in AI workflows and stuff like that.
I would say, I mean, my feedback or my advice or my comment would be the following. I agree with you that there's a lot of hype and a lot of FOMO, and obviously the people that are selling the FOMO, they have an incentive to do that because they're selling a class, they want to build their influence, etc., etc. So that's one thing. The second thing is that it's true that senior engineers that are using Cloud Code well or Cursor or whatever, they go faster than before. And I do agree that today it's hard to hire like a strong developer, like an 8 out of 10, feels slow today in this market compared to an 8 out of 10 who's good at using Cursor. And so when you hire, you should test on how they're using AI, because that's going to be part of the expectation in my mind. And it's going to be more and more so. The risk you have is to have people that are reluctant to it. And there are some people offshore that are reluctant to using it. And that's a problem. Or at least that can be a problem. It doesn't mean that you don't want them to be able to code well without it, but they need to like the idea that they can go faster. And I think that's the way I would approach it in the short term. In terms of looking at how others are doing it or are using it, I think, and I haven't found, it's harder for us for indie, especially because we're less in the startup scene. It's interesting to, if you can, go work for like 1 day a week in an AI native startup to see how they work, and just look from the inside how it works. Like, what are they doing differently, etc. You just work there, you code, you respond to customer questions, you interview people, and then you look, and then during lunchtime or whatever, you just ask. And I think that if you do that, you may learn something. That's something that I'm planning to do, for example, this quarter. And it's definitely something that I would do if I were in San Francisco, because it would be much easier. Because then you can actually see what's the reality.
I agree. And if you do that, please post about it, because I would love to know. because there's this fear, right, that like someone knows something that I don't know about this new technology, and they're going to use it to eat my lunch. And it's impossible to discern the froth from the meat, because everyone's incentivized to hype this stuff up.
Yeah.
So would love to know sort of where
Yeah, I mean,
where it
for
actually
me,
is.
it's a post I've never written, but it's a thing with AI today. It feels like teenage sex. Like everybody talks about it as a teenager, but very few have done it, and you don't know, and so everybody has FOMO, saying maybe they're doing something that I don't know or whatever. But the reality is that some people are doing it, and so we need to find them. So at least go to an AI native company. In Miami, in London, in Paris, there are some.
I've had chats with, I guess I'm not sure, like I would call them like AI, I don't know, like super users, I guess would be the word. But like I'm not sure, I don't mean it as like nicely necessarily as I'm saying it. People who have bought into the hype, right, and who use the tools proudly, but perhaps don't know the difference between the output of what would happen if they didn't use those tools, right, or like what someone who is like a senior developer would be able to do is sort of the same time frame. So it's just like I feel like there's a little bit of like you got to sort of like suss these people out to make sure that
which is why I'm saying go to a company that is building AI, like somebody reputable, like somebody that you
right. Well, how do you find those? Like
I mean,
the landing page looks good.
That's something where you need to figure it out, like to do some research. But people that you feel either young startup, like maybe a YC company that is building an AI tool based out of Miami or something, and they're just shipping super fast. Ideally not in your category, and you can go and spend time with them. I mean, so a company that has raised money, so like company that has done through a VC trail, so that they have over invested in infrastructure. I think that could be an interesting path. That's what I would do if I were you, and that's clearly something that I want to do, because again, I'm doing some things. I realize what I can do, go to one step above, but what can I do? Like, it feels that some people are going 2 or 3 steps above me, and I want to see from the inside. And so that's the thing that
I do think as well that eventually there is an arbitrage opportunity when you have that knowledge and workflows, but eventually like the right and the good workflows come out within our system and people converge to something that is working. So I've seen it with like people always use the best tools, like Claude Code is now kind of winning in that space, and people have just from the signals you see people using more Claude Code than Cursor, and there's a lot of tools out there. There's a lot of options in AI. But for the specific use cases, I know like what people are doing with it. And I think eventually that knowledge comes out in some way, and people kind of standardize it within their workflows. But yeah, if you can get the early scoop of that and get in as well, I think it's very beneficial.
I mean, that will be. I think that. Well, to finish the podcast, I'll ask my question, one of my signature question. I typically ask a question about AI, but we've talked about AI for 10, 15 minutes, so maybe we'll leave that one out. So my last question, Jason, before wrapping the show, is what is the one most important thing that you've learned from your mother?
Oh, from my mother. Oh, geez. To be creative and to sort of keep like an open mind to connecting different ideas from different places. She's a very creative person and always had like a sort of free spirit energy that I try to keep for myself.
Thank you, Jason. We'll finish on that beautiful note. Thank you, Elston, for coming back. And Jason, let us know how. I mean, you put these feedback into into action.
Yeah. Check in 6 months. From
exactly.
Rubber hits the road today. I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Excited to hear. And thank you, both of you, for being part of this indie board session.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.